Space is very big, but it's also very exciting. And what are we going to do with all of it? Well, we could paint it, but that's going to take too long. So why don't we just have a chat about it? Get someone in here who actually knows a few things about the exploration of space, the march toward it. Yes, that's right. We're talking with Ellie in space. She has joined us again. And this time I've got some very good, very specific questions. We'll see how she does. I'm Brian. Welcome to Futuraza. So great to have you back. Thank you.
I'm nervous. Is this a pop quiz?
Nope, you'll do great. So you've transitioned from traditional TV over to space reporting.
Yeah.
And what I want to tell the audience, in your words, is what it is about that background that makes your stuff so good. What were the lessons? What were the benefits?
Yes. Oh, good. A question that I feel very, very comfortable answering. So I worked in TV news for almost 10 years and covering all sorts of stuff, whether it be a city council meeting, a house fire, a murder, all sorts of stuff. And it really gave me the skills to work on a deadline, learn how to interview people, learn how to get out of my comfort zone and talk to strangers, learn how to edit video, you name it. So one of the big misconceptions, people think that just because you're working in TV news, you make a lot of money and you have a crew with you. And both of those are not true. Most of the time, I was going to the stories by myself with the camera, with the tripod, setting up for the interview, tell me your, first and last name and your title. And that really taught me a lot of skills just to tell a story in a concise, digestible way. Most of the time, we only had, less than 2 minutes to tell a story, and we had a deadline to meet every day. So what I try to bring with my space reporting is this unique flavor of interviewing experts and doing what I think I do best, which is asking the questions. I'm not used to being in the hot seat. Asking the questions of experts, maybe even getting their personality to shine a little bit and helping teach people about space in a way that you're not going to see on, let's say, a technical channel. There are some channels where, the hosts sort of have an engineering background, and that's great. I don't try to be the expert. I try to find the experts. That's why I interviewed Elon Musk. That's why I flew to San Francisco and went to Scott Manley's house. So I'm trying to think outside of the box and, use my journalism skills to tell stories that you're just not going to see anywhere else.
And it comes through, I think. I think what you're producing is concise and very well formatted. I've sent a lot of people the video you made where you did talk with I think it was a city council member about the economic impact on the area. And it's just well put together and it's good stuff. So now let's talk about SpaceX. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually, a lot of people, they'll ask me, do you work for SpaceX? And I'm like, indirectly. Yeah, I do. 'Cause in some ways I do. I mean, I cover their stuff. I follow what they're doing so closely. And some people say, well, you should cover more than just SpaceX, which I do sometimes. But SpaceX is not only leading and carrying the space industry, they're also sort of, there is like a SpaceX cult, if you want to say it, just like we have with Tesla. SpaceX has a lot of fans because SpaceX is innovative. SpaceX is rapidly iterating. They are pushing the bounds of what people think is possible for space. And so that's why I love covering them.
So the question I was going to ask, but you somehow deduced it from me just saying, have you heard of it, is how are their innovations changing, not just space flight, but for everyday people? And yeah, it's the tech, it's Starship, it's Starlink. It's Starlink.
We're trying to get the Starship program more evolved, and we're doing baby steps. I mean, every single flight has built upon the last one. We're going to hopefully see a catch on Flight 5. But how has it changed life here on Earth, SpaceX, that is? Well, Starlink already has radically. I drove to Forks, Washington, not too far from you, to interview a Native American tribe that had never had internet on the reservation ever. So these people were able to make an email address for the first time. This is not only providing, entertainment, which most of us go online for, but also access to healthcare, education, all sorts of stuff. We're closing that gap in the digital divide with Starlink, making it accessible, affordable, for rural and underserved areas. Starlink is why I can stream from Margaritaville and do during the Starship launches, because the service is not very good down there. But it's already making a huge impact.
It's not so much that the service isn't good, it's that it's not designed to have that many people in such a small area
Yeah.
so briefly. And after one of the launches, when I heard that it was very loud, I went back and watched you and Joe Tegmeyer to see. And the thing is, over the rumble, even at how many miles is that? 7 miles, 9 miles?
It was about 6.
6 miles away.
Yeah.
You can't hear anything. It's so loud. Anyway, that's off topic a bit. So there's this little aircraft, colloquially known as the Vomit Comet, which is used to train folks who have space aspirations. Can you tell me a little bit about that, Ellie?
Yes. So I want to preface it by saying I'm very grateful that I was voted for to go on a zero-G flight for free and to report about the experience. So unfortunately, my experience was I did fulfill the vomit part of the title of Vomit Comet. It made me feel extremely sick. And there's some interesting, nuances there. The lunar gravity portion, which they did some lunar gravity passes for the first few, I actually felt pretty good. It was when they went from 0G to 2G, essentially, because, you're doing these parabolas and the transitions are very hard on your body. However, keep in mind, this is what astronauts have to go through. This 0G training, it's fantastic if you really want to put yourself in the shoes of what it would be like to be an astronaut, because a lot of research and science is done on these 0G flights, or they can be joyrides for people that can afford it, because they are pretty expensive. But it is it's not for everyone. I'm glad that I did it, but not sure if it makes me feel confident about space in the future.
It's, by all accounts, from everything I've ever heard, it's at best unpleasant.
Yes.
But hey, you could make a music video there if you're okay. Go.
Yes.
So, looking at SpaceX's approach to technology, innovation, pacing, how are they different from their rivals?
Well, wow. Well, traditionally, NASA was, their rival. Government agencies. Before SpaceX, people didn't think that it was possible for a private space company to successfully send a rocket into orbit. So SpaceX has already opened up the door for so many startups and private companies to even just see that it's possible and try their own hand at this. Now, I like to compare, SpaceX, kind of Rocket Lab, and Blue Origin. Blue Origin is extremely secretive with what they're doing. And it's interesting, covering different companies and seeing sort of the feedback from the audience. And I think that people like SpaceX primarily because they are so open and transparent. Their social media is great. They keep us up to date on what they're doing. Not every company is doing that. So I think that that's why they're so loved. And, they also have that access from the side of the road. So you're just not going to get that with these other companies. And that's what sets them apart.
I would say that, and we talked about this in the other video, if you get down there, you can get to within 20 feet of the original Starhopper. You can get so close to it that you can no longer see it because the fence is there. Yeah. The access is unparalleled. And I'd say one difference, and this is, I have some selection bias in this because I've only talked with SpaceX employees. I haven't talked with employees of other aerospace companies, is the enthusiasm. These people feel like and are making a difference. They're going to work. I talked to a welder who was happy to talk with me and three other random guys as he was heading in for his shift. And I said, boy, you must get sick of us. No, we don't. I love it. And I said, how long have you been here? And he said, 2 years. I'm like, you've been talking to me's for 2 years? That's how excited he was. And I think if you could bottle that, you could have your own kind of SpaceX place. So with SpaceX opening the door to commercial space tourism in ways that we've never really seen before, what kind of opportunities do you expect? What kind of adoption do you expect?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I did just cover, the Blue Origin New Shepard flight. They're back in the game doing their suborbital space tourism hops. But SpaceX did announce that they're going to be offering, your own private mission to space if you want to sign up for it. Now, we don't know the prices of either of these, but we do know that Jared Isaacman is now going to have his second private space mission with Polaris Dawn. We also have learned recently about this mission called Fram 2. And this is a cryptocurrency billionaire, also self-funding, but choosing three other people to go along with him on the first human mission above the polar orbits or polar regions in polar orbit. So that, I think, is probably also because SpaceX said they would start offering this opportunity late 2024. So that might be included there, but we're going to see in the beginning more rich people, wealthy people being able to sort of do their own missions. And then as time goes on, we'll have more access for, people like you and me. But it's a parallel to what we saw in the early days of aviation. When people started flying, it was only for the mega rich, and well, that has changed. Now we don't have as much leg room, but that's okay. But, eventually it will be, I think, affordable for you and me to actually, hopefully, at least go to the moon.
For reference, people saying, how come there's no legroom anymore? The flight still has legroom. Those seats cost extra. And adjusted for inflation, those tickets are still cheaper than they were back then. You're coming out ahead.
Yeah.
And worth noting, I piece this one together too. Something like a little over 2% of all Americans who have ever flown to space have done so in the company of Jared on his dime. And more than 1% of all humans who have ever been to space have done so aboard missions with Jared Isaacman. So that's making an impact. And to the people saying, hey, how come billionaires why are they sending their money to space? Hey, the money isn't going to space. It's being spent on the ground to get you to space. That money's being spent.
I think people underestimate this Polaris Dawn mission. They are extremely brave for what they're trying to do. And they're really, they're kind of taking some risks. And I feel like that hasn't been sort of like talked about enough. It's like, oh, this is so exciting, which it is, but this is not like easy or, commonplace what they're doing. And so, like you said, it's not just about him being able to afford this. He's doing things to help future astronauts, future space travel, to learn lessons. I mean, their objectives for this one mission, it's crazy how much they're trying to cram in there, but it's really a selfless act that's going to benefit us in the future.
I couldn't have said it better. My goodness. So you publish quite a bit. How do you balance accuracy against the deadlines, self-imposed deadlines, but you've got a schedule that you try and keep. You've got to feed the beast. The content machine is always hungry.
Yes.
How do you balance that?
So I think that I'm a little bit unique to the other channels because if I see something that is, in my opinion, breaking news, and if I neglect it, I'm not doing my job, I'm late to the party. By the time I cover it, I don't want it to be old news, because we had that same sort of fire lit under our what in news, right? You have to be ahead of all the other stations or else you're late to the party and no one cares. You have to be the one to break the story. So obviously it's not as intense with what I'm doing, but if I see something that I think I need to cover within a day, I immediately make the video. And I think that that's where I have a leg up on some other people because I can edit really quickly. I can get the information together, put down the B-roll, and have a story out in a very timely manner. What I notice is that a lot of other channels, they'll sort of have like a week wrap up on the same day at the same time. I'm just not that structured. And so I guess until it stops working, this is like what works for me, which is to basically, work when I think it's absolutely necessary. I do have some stuff planned from time to time, events and whatnot, but I really like to stay on top of the news cycle. And so that's like most important to me. Like this past weekend, there was a NASA press conference on Saturday. I don't normally work on Saturday, but I was like, you have to do it. And, so I hope people see that sort of difference.
And it is important. I still appreciate the weekly roundups, but you'll regularly see them start with, well, just as this was going out, this happened. And it's like, well, yes, and now it's 7.5 days old.
Correct.
So that is tricky to balance. And I think by leaning on a lot of the experts that you have access to, that gives you another tremendous advantage. Well, the conversation was fantastic, but it got a little bit long. We got to get these edited and get them up. So please, I hope I can have your patience. What do we miss? What do we misunderstand? What are you hoping we get to in part 2? Well, there's going to be more. There always is. But this is a fantastic conversation, and I don't want it to get too long on you folks. So come on back tomorrow. We'll have the rest of it up, and it's going to be a fantastic. Like, subscribe, do the usual, and I'll see you tomorrow.